On the agenda is 268, if that is the next one you would like to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On this one, it's very important that you have the substitute before you that I would ask the committee to adopt.
Will the council please report the substitute?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. So this substitute now adds code section 16.1 to 69.2. It adds a new subdivision K under 16.1 to 69.1 with the language about sexual assault and trafficking, which is the heart of what this bill does. And it removes an evidence standard that existed in subdivision 5 of 16.1 272 new language of the original bill. So please review the substitute in front of you to see exactly what those technical changes are, which aren't technical, but they move the language around in the bill to get to what the bill was intended to do.
Do we have a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, the substitute is reported by the council. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is before us. Delegate Watts.
The bill as introduced, HB 268, essentially spoke to the need, the problem, the concern, and that being that there are times when a juvenile who's been victimized by the alleged victim of a crime that they commit has in fact had such trauma, particularly in trafficking or sexual, the substitute underscores that this is felonial sexual assault. In other words, raped or being used for sexual trafficking. That information be an important part of what is being considered when the juvenile is before the court and might be tried as an adult. This is all in the transfer hearing, where by probable cause, this becomes, as you see on the substitute, another element for the court to decide upon, in addition to the longstanding issues of the age and other aspects of that child before the court. What proceeds after that, then, is the standard way in which these types of cases would move through the system with the determination of whether or not this child is to be tried in the JDNR court, where they have all of the emphasis on the services and rehabilitation rather than ending up in a potential prison situation. And that is essentially what the bill is before you.
Thank you, Delegate. Are there any questions from the committee? Is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of the bill?
Valerie Slater with Rise for Youth, and we support this bill.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Fallon Speaker, Legal Aid Justice Center, Director of the Youth Justice Program, we support this bill. Children who commit offenses against their abusers should be provided with treatment and rehabilitative services instead of being tried as adults. Trauma counseling, community-based treatment services, and other rehabilitative measures should be used to help these child victims heal and prepare to re-enter society in the best way possible to succeed. The best place for them to be able to do that is to be able to receive the services and benefits and resources of the juvenile court. Thank you.
Monica Hutchinson for Virginia State Conference, NAACP, and we support this bill. Thank you.
James Dole from Human Rights for Kids. I'm going to be very brief. We have a couple people online from our organization that will give more in-depth testimony, including a survivor who lived through something like this. But I want to just drive home the point, as you consider this bill, that if your son or daughter was raped or sex trafficked or abused, and then they end up committing a crime against their abuser, we don't believe at Human Rights for Kids any of those children should ever be in the adult system, ever. I think it's really important to drive that point home. I know it's hard to imagine sometimes thinking about what would drive prosecutors to want to charge a child as an adult in those situations, but we've seen it over and over throughout this country. Young girls like Centoya Brown, Alexis Martin, too many to name. And it's unfortunate that they end up being prosecuted as adults, but when situations like this arise, we need to make it absolutely clear that we need to wrap our arms around those children, tell them we love them, we care about them, and that we're not going to sentence them to adult prison time where they're going to spend decades on end in prison. It's a shameful practice in the United States, and hopefully it comes to an end. But I hope you all hear from the folks online, because they'll be able to speak very directly to this particular issue. So thank you.
Thank you. And speaking online, I have Sarah Cruzen.
Yes. So thank you, committee members, staff, and all who are here today to stand in support for healing democracy through reimagined policy, especially when it's regarding children. And it's also the month of National Human Trafficking Prevention. So I think it's really great that we're highlighting and uplifting the voices of those who have been assaulted in the United States. It's an honor and with gratitude to uplift the people, our community members who have served to defend and protect our nation, and all who continue to serve and protect our nation. Thank you for your service. I have family members who have and do serve as well. I work with Human Rights for Kids, and also I am a survivor. HB 268 is an imperative piece of legislation to ensure that a safety measure prioritizes and protects the interest of our children. Any form of exploitation, sex trafficking, slavery, and any other unthinkable crime imposed by adults upon children is child abuse on all levels. It's been 30 years since the juvenile criminal justice system documented my child sex trafficking experiences. As a survivor, a child of sexual assault, exploitation, I'm a mother to a beautiful 9-year-old little girl. I'm an advocate for children's rights and a contributing member to society. Having returned trauma violence on the community member who began sexually indoctrinating and grooming me when I was 11 years old, and he was 33, I think is very telling, because that continued practice is still affecting so many children today. I did have a goal to be a pediatric surgeon. Instead, I was handed a life without parole sentence a few months after I shot the man who sexually molested me and trafficked me to others in the state of California. I committed this trauma violence when I was 16 years old. I and so many others all too well understand the impacts of oppressive legislation, crimes against humanity, and moral injuries. After 19 years and 7 months, I was paroled, and that was in 2013. It's been a decade, and it's criminal that there are continuous legislative practices criminalizing children who come in conflict with the law and have experienced unthinkable abuses. That's why today the state of Virginia has authority to reimagine legislation, placing the needs and healing of children at top priority. High quality, restorative, transformative justice investments that are tailored to meet the individualized needs of children experiencing crimes against humanity are aligned with American values of protecting the human rights of all children. Having a pardon granted by Governor Newsom was a high quality, restorative, transformative action. And for all governors who are listening today, you have the authority to reimagine justice to protect the vulnerable children being held in state institutions for trauma violence acts upon their predator. With this bill, HB 268 will allow for the current crisis at the state level to acknowledge the vulnerable children that are being exploited, indoctrinated, groomed, sexually abused, and experiencing child sex trafficking and slavery as a light of hope, so that we as adults can realign and rethink how we treat our children. Children experiencing such inhumane, exploitive tactics and practices have no business to be re-victimized within our legislative framework. And too many children are held, traumatized, and harmed by institutions designed to break the human spirit. Children need to feel safe. They need to feel heard and respected. They need to have their rights honored, held with love and grace, especially the children who have experienced complex and compounded traumas and return the abuse on their perpetrator. Again, high-quality restorative and transformative best practices are at the very core, rooted in compassion, forgiveness, understanding, equal justice, and empathy. In placing the safety and well-being of our children within communities promotes and fosters thrivability and aligns with their birthright to the pursuit of happiness. It is our responsibility to ensure that and safeguard and offer the resources are in place and rooted to put the wellness of our children, families, and communities first, and build from a foundation that is wholesome, individualized, and rooted in genuine safety. HB 268 will protect human rights of a child who come in conflict with the law. This legislation is a great first step to bending the arc towards placing healing and wellness best practices over punitive and oppressive ones.
Thank you so
I'm in
much
full
for,
support of this bill. Thank you.
thank you so
Sorry.
much, thank you very much for your testimony. Next online, I have Teresa Komenos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Teresa Komenos from Human Rights for Kids in support of House Bill 268. This bill recognizes that children who are victims of sex trafficking or sexual assault and who commit crimes against their abusers should not be subject to lengthy prison sentences, but should instead be treated as victims and receive appropriate treatment and services in juvenile court. In the United States, Child Protective Services estimates that 63,000 children are sexually abused each year. And in 2015, the National Center for the Missing Exploited Children estimated that 1 in 6 endangered runaways are likely child sex trafficking victims, and that approximately 100,000 U.S. children are sexually exploited every year. The reasons why sexually abused and trafficked children may lash out against their offenders can be understood by examining psychological research, which recognizes that abusers often make their victims undergo prolonged stages of grooming. These grooming tactics lead to traumatic bonding, in which a victim develops a dysfunctional attachment to his or her abuser. This phenomenon, considered together with the fact that children's brains are not fully developed, prevents them from fully understanding the consequences of their actions as it relates to individuals who have committed severe abuse against them. Children cannot developmentally control their emotions and impulses and cannot evaluate risks in the same manner as adults. Children who suffer from repeated and brutal victimization often have no way of understanding that they could be incarcerated for an action that they believe is self-defense against their abuser. But the law will often not recognize these actions as self-defense, and children are not always capable of understanding nuanced legal distinctions about imminent danger. Yet psychological research shows that children who have been victimized have real feelings of danger triggered by their abusers. Nevertheless, public policy should dictate that children who commit crimes against their abusers are provided with treatment and services, not criminal punishment. This child would not have committed a crime if it were not for the abuser having abused or trafficked them in the first place. And so the law should focus on treatment, not punishment of the child victim. And because of all that, we would encourage the committee's favorable support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone in the audience who is here to speak in opposition of the bill? All right, seeing no questions from the committee, Delegate Watts, do you have any final remarks? All right.
Motion to report with substitute.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to report the substitute. The clerk will open the roll. Delegate Watts, would you like to state your vote for the clerk to record?
I would, thank you.
All right, Delegate Watts votes aye. All right, the clerk will close the roll. Council?
Thank you. Delegate